If you would at first, get your Bibles out and turn to the 2nd chapter of John. That's where we're going to start at. We're going to talk about the seven miracles of Jesus in the Gospel of John. And we'll start with chapter 2, verses 1 through 11. These are sometimes called signs, but they're all miracles. And this is where he turned water into wine. We'll start reading there. It says, on the third day there was a wedding in Cana of Galilee, and the mother of Jesus was there. Now both Jesus and his disciples were invited to the wedding. And when they ran out of wine, the mother of Jesus said to him, they have no wine. Jesus said to her, woman, what does your concern have to do with me? My hour has not yet come. His mother said to the servants, whatever he says to you, do it. Now there were set 6 water pots of stone according to the manner of purification of the Jews, containing 20 or 30 gallons apiece. Jesus said to them, fill the water pots with water, and they filled them up to the brim. And he said to them, draw some out now and take it for the master of the feast. And they took it. When the master of the feast had tasted the water that was made wine, he did not know where it came from, but the servants who had drawn the water knew. The master of the feast called the bridegroom. And he said to him, every man at the beginning sets out the good wine when the guest is well drunk, then the inferior. But you kept the good wine until now. This beginning of signs Jesus did in Cana of Galilee, and manifested his glory, and his disciples believed in him. Now, you might ask, why did Jesus turn the water into wine? Well, he wasn't going to party about it. See, a lot of people take this verses right here and think it's a liberty to go get a party started. It's not. It's to demonstrate his divine power and authority, showing his ability to transform the ordinary into the extraordinary. It also revealed his glory, and his disciples believed in him because of it. But I want you to notice one thing too, here in verse 5. His mother said to the servants, whatever he says to you, do it. We can take that same little verse right there and apply it to our own lives, and whatever Jesus in the Spirit tells us to do, we should do immediately. Now, the second miracle we're going to talk about here is the healing of the nobleman's son. If we turn to chapter 4, and we're going to read verses 46 through 54. So Jesus came again to Cana of Galilee, where he had made the water wine. And there was a certain nobleman whose son was sick at Capernaum. When he heard that Jesus had come out of Judea into Galilee, he went to him and implored him to come down and heal his son, for he was at the point of death. Then Jesus said to him, unless you people see signs and wonders, you will by no means believe. The nobleman said to him, sir, come down before my child dies. Jesus said to him, go your way, your son lives. So the man believed the word that Jesus spoke to him, and he went his way. And as he was now going down, his servants met him and told him, saying, your son lives. Then he inquired of them the hour when he got better. And they said to him, yesterday at the 7th hour the fever left him. So the father knew that it was at the same hour in which Jesus said to him, your son lives. And he himself believed, in his whole household. This again is the second sign Jesus did when he had come out of Judea into Galilee. Now, the Bible does not say exactly who this man is. We know that he is a nobleman, may have been in a high-ranking official to a king. But his son is sick, and Jesus is his only hope. And folks, in this broken world, Jesus is really our only hope. And we're going to look at the third miracle here, the healing of the lame man at the pool. We turn to John chapter 5, verses 5 through 9. Now, a lot of these right here, there's a lot more verses to go with. I was just trying to kind of short it down for everybody. It says, now a certain man was there who had an infirmity 38 years. When Jesus saw him lying there, and knew that he had already been in that condition a long time, he said to him, do you want to be made well? The sick man answered him, sir, I have no man to put me into the pool when the water is stirred up. But while I am coming, another steps down before me. Jesus said to him, rise, take up your bed, and walk. And immediately the man was made well, took up his bed, and he walked. Now Jesus speaks in no name but his own, and with an authority which belongs to God. And since Jesus is God in the flesh, he can do that. He commands the man to rise, take up his bed, and walk. The man becomes whole immediately, just that quick. Now this is incontestable proof of the omnipotence of Christ. Omnipotence, all-powerful. He has power over everything. The fourth miracle we want to look at right quick is that Jesus fed the 5,000, a story that everybody's familiar with. We're going to turn to John chapter 6 and read verses 5 through 14. There it is. Then Jesus lifted up his eyes, and seeing a great multitude coming toward him, he said to Philip, "Where shall we buy bread that these may eat?" But this he said to test him, for he himself knew what he would do. You notice a couple of these miracles in here, Jesus already knew about the situation. Philip answered him, 200 denarii worth of bread is not sufficient for them, that every one of them may have a little. One of his disciples, Andrew, Simon Peter's brother, said to him, "There is a lad here who has 5 barley loaves and 2 small fish. But what are they among so many?" Then Jesus said, "Make the people sit down." Now there was much grass in the place, so the men sat down in number about 5,000. And Jesus took the loaves, and when he had given thanks, he distributed them to the disciples, and the disciples to those sitting down, and likewise of the fish as much as they wanted. So when they were filled, he said to his disciples, "Gather up the fragments that remain, so that nothing is lost." Therefore they gathered them up and filled 12 baskets with the fragments of the 5 barley loaves which were left over by those who had eaten. Then those men, when they had seen the sign that Jesus did, said, "This is truly the prophet who is come into the world." Now, the disciples here learned firsthand that God is greater than the needs of 5,000 people, possibly 15,000 more when you count the women and children. Now, this gave them confidence that they could trust him for their own daily needs. We can also trust him for our everyday provisions like food, clothing, shelter, transportation, and he certainly provides with what we need. The fifth miracle we're going to talk about later on in chapter 6 is John 6, verses 16 through 21. Jesus walking on the water. I like this verse this message right here. It says, "Now when evening came, his disciples went down to the sea, got into the boat, and went over the sea to Capernaum. And it was already dark, and Jesus had not come to them. Then the sea arose because a great wind was blowing. So when they had rowed about 3 or 4 miles, they saw Jesus walking on the sea and drawing near the boat, and they were afraid. But he said to them, 'It is I, do not be afraid.' Then they willingly received him into the boat, and immediately the boat was at the land where they were going." Now, Jesus walking on water is certainly extraordinary. I've not done it, nor have I seen anybody else do it. He's again showing his disciples and showing us that he has authority and power over all his creation. But let's take another look at this passage right here. The Sea of Galilee is now about 7 miles wide, 13 miles long. Tabgha, where he fed the 5,000, to Capernaum is 1.5 miles from each other. Now, when the disciples got in the boat, they started rowing. Storm came up, they got lost. They rowed about 3 or 4 miles the wrong way. But they got Jesus into the boat, and they were at their destination. It was that quick that they covered that ground when Jesus got in the boat with them. They were lost, but Jesus got them on the right track in a quick amount of time. Now I want you to turn to chapter 9. We're going to look at the 6th miracle, healing of the man born blind. We're going to read verses 1 through 7. It says, now as Jesus passed by, he saw a man who was blind from birth. And his disciples asked him, saying, Rabbi, who sinned, this man or his parents, that he was born blind? Jesus answered, neither this man nor his parents sinned, but that the works of God should be revealed in him. I must work the works of him who sent me while it is day. The night is coming when no one can work. As long as I am in the world, I am the light of the world. Then he had said these things, he spat on the ground and made clay with the saliva, and he anointed the eyes of the blind man with clay. And he said to him, go wash in the pool of Siloam, which is translated sent. So he went and washed and came back seeing. Now we should not assume that some sin is to blame for a physical ailment. God provided a platform using this man's blindness to demonstrate his glory. We also see this in passage 1 of the 7 I ams of Jesus. Amazing how the head of a blind man and I am the light are together here. It's not by accident. Now, if we go to the 7th miracle, the raising of Lazarus from the dead, John chapter 11. I'll read a few verses from that. Start out with verse 4, whenever I can get to it. When Jesus heard that, he said, this sickness, Lazarus had died. When Jesus heard that, he said, this sickness is not unto death, but for the glory of God, that the Son of God may be glorified through it. Now we go to verses 21 and 23. Now Martha said to Jesus, Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not have died. But even now I know that whatever you ask of God, God will give it you. Jesus said to her, your brother will rise again. And we go to verses 39 through 44. Jesus said, take away the stone. Martha, the sister of him who was dead, said to him, Lord, by this time there's a stench, for he had been dead 4 days. Jesus said to her, did I not say to you that if you would believe, you would see the glory of God? And they took away the stone from the place where the dead man was lying. And Jesus lifted up his eyes and said, Father, I thank you that you have heard me. And I know that you always hear me, but because of the people who are standing by, I said this, that they may believe that you sent me. And when he had said these things, he cried with a loud voice, Lazarus, come forth. And he who had died came out bound hand and foot with grave clothes, and his face was wrapped with a cloth. Jesus said to them, loose him and let him go. Now Jesus certainly could have kept Lazarus from dying, but in his wisdom, he chose to do something better. He did not spare his friends' grief because it benefited them, as the disciples, Martha and Mary, and the many witnesses who believed in him, and there was some that believed in him afterwards. Now, what can we take from this, or what can we realize from these miracles that may benefit us today? The first miracle, we learn that Jesus is extraordinary, that he has power over his creations, and that we should do what he says. Second miracle is Jesus can heal our sicknesses. He is in heaven, we're on earth, and just like he healed the nobleman's son from afar off, he can heal us too from a great distance. The third miracle shows us this further shows Jesus' omnipotence, but that we should also walk with him. Fourth miracle, Jesus provides not only physical food for our bodies, but spiritual food for our souls. Fifth miracle, Jesus shows us again his power over creation. But if we get off track a little bit, going the wrong way, he can bring us back. And he always welcomes us with open arms. The sixth miracle, he is the light of the world, and he helps us to see. Psalm 119, 105, one of my favorite verses, your word is a lamp to my feet and a light to my path, and he'll guide the way. He will raise us from the dead. For the Lord himself, this is 1 Thessalonians 4:16, for the Lord himself will descend from heaven with a shout, with the voice of an archangel, and with the trumpet of God. And the dead in Christ will rise first. Just like Lazarus, If we pass from this life before the rapture, we'll be raised from the dead. And I'd like to close with John 21:25. The miracles and deeds that Jesus did that are recorded is enough to amaze you. It has me. My mind is blown every time I read these in the Gospels. And in 3 years, he did all this. And John tells us that the world can't hold all the miracles that Jesus did. Now, that's like I said, that's just mind-blowing to me. Faith, we got a song picked out.
391.
If you have a need, come on up, lay it at the Lord's feet.